I want to make sure.
Yeah, we are.
So we can come to the polls and say, we're the first one.
We can brag.
Yes. First of all, let me thank you all for coming out tonight, spending the time here, and Sean for getting everything together. It's great to be in Schuylkill County. What I'd like to do is introduce myself, introduce the Libertarian Party, and talk about some of the things you can expect from a Libertarian governor. That's my standard stuff speech. This is what I give to any random audience. So you're the first ones that I'm going to be trying this out on. After I go through that, what I'd like to do is talk about how we get on the ballot, because it's not a trivial thing, especially when you're talking a statewide office like governor. So let me start at the beginning. My name is Krawchuk. I'm 60 years old. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, North Philadelphia to be precise, front of the boulevard. I'm married still married to my first wife, Roberta. We've been married now 36 years. We have 3 daughters, and they pick on us. They say, all of our friends' parents are divorced, separated. What's the matter with you guys?
Yeah.
I have a degree in physics from St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia. I'm also a businessman. I'm an information technology entrepreneur. I opened up my own business back in 1988, still running today. A little bit rockier today, listening to your stories. Mine is a lot similar to that. I also hold 3 United States patents related to database theory, so if you have any geeks in the audience, maybe we can get together and talk about it later on. I also have, my first novel was published late last year, Atlas Snout. I have a copy of it here. I'm calling it my platform novel. So I'm a family man, a businessman, an inventor, an author, but most importantly, I'm a libertarian. We libertarians are different from the 2 old parties because we are the party of principle. Every law we support, every law we oppose, can all be traced back to one central idea. The idea that your life is yours, that your property is yours, that you have the God-given, inalienable right to live your life your way without interference, provided only you respect the rights and property of others.
Amen.
That's it. That's what it means to be a libertarian. And the public has reacted very positively to this message, because since we were founded in 1971, we have grown to become the 3rd largest party, not only in Pennsylvania, but nationwide, outnumbering all the other 3rd parties put together. We currently have, last number I saw was about 150 elected or appointed libertarians serving in public office, 34 of them here in Pennsylvania, but that number 34 was from before the election. It was going to be at least 35, and I know of 5 other victors. I think we have about 40 of them. So that means roughly 1/4 of all the elected libertarians in the United States are here in Pennsylvania.
That's awesome. One of them's in that chair.
That's right.
Wow.
And that's what it takes.
And his head's growing more and more.
So what can you expect from a libertarian governor? Obviously, you're going to get somebody who's going to protect your right to live your life your way. And as Tom pointed out, everybody always has to have 3 issues. Can't be 2, can't be 4, has to be 3. And of course, my biggest issue is taxes. Who thinks they're taxed too little? Who thinks they're taxed too much? That's right. It's an easy question. Do you know, the size of government has been increasing for years. That's one of the reasons why taxes are so high, is because spending is high. As spending increases, taxes have to increase. In fact, in Pennsylvania, the cost of government has been growing at more than 3 times the rate of inflation for the last 50 years. Now, I ran as the Libertarian Party candidate for governor in 2002. I ran against Ed Rendell. Back then, I would tell people, for the last 40 years, government's been growing at more than 3 times the rate of inflation. Well, here it is 12 years later, and you know what I'm saying? The same thing. It doesn't matter if there's a Democrat in the office. It doesn't matter if there's a Republican in office. It doesn't matter that we're looking across the hyperinflation days of the Carter era. The direction of government is up at 3 times the rate of inflation. Well, when I'm governor, that trend will end. Because the first thing I'm promising I will do is I will veto every single tax increase. People say, hey, what can you do? You're just one guy. There's all those Democrats and Republicans. The Pennsylvania Constitution gives the governor all kinds of powers, and the power of the veto is one of the most powerful. So it will take a supermajority to pass any new tax. Better yet, Pennsylvania governor has the line item veto. Can you imagine going through and striking out all the funding for that gun registry database they have? Striking out the funding for all these illegal and unconstitutional programs? And if they want to pass it, again, they're going to need a supermajority to push it up. So once I'm governor, the direction will start going down. My plan is to introduce a series of budgets which will eliminate the personal income tax over 4 years. Step it up. We won't be spending as much money. So that's my big issue. Taxes and spending. We're going to reduce it. Second big issue, as I travel the state, this is what I hear from other people. When I ran last time, my wife and I, we traveled the state constantly. Taxes was obviously the big issue. Number two is crime. Right now, our prisons are overcrowded. Seriously overcrowded. But they're at the point now where they're releasing people from prisons where they're so crowded. Do you know there's a fact that over 95% of all crimes are committed by 5% of the criminals? That's from the Commonwealth Foundation, I heard that. One of the powers granted to me as governor by the Constitution is the power of the pardon, power of parole, power over the criminals. So what I'm promising to do, the second thing, is that every single violent criminal, I'm going to eliminate parole. When they get in jail, they're going to stay in jail. They're going to serve every single day of their sentence. Since most crime is committed by these criminals, crime is guaranteed to go down. So they're going to serve every day of their sentence while they're in prison. And it's a shame to let them out, especially after we finally get them in there through our convoluted criminal justice system. And that's even another story. Our criminal justice system is plain, flat out racist. Do you know that for every one white guy who goes to jail, 15 minorities go to jail? I just checked that number again a few weeks ago. And Joe, you're the research expert. You can take a look at that number. But it was back when I ran in 2002, it was 15 to 1. I looked at it just now, it's still 15 to 1. Even though minorities only make up about 10% of the Pennsylvania population. Something's out of kilter. And when you look at that middle part, 18-year-olds, 25-year-olds, it's 55 to 1. For every one white guy, one white kid who goes to jail, 55 minorities go to jail. I'll be looking at this into the reasons why, and one of the reasons why this is happening is because of this insane war on drugs that we have. In fact, we are jailing so many people, non-violent people, just for smoking a doober, that we're at the point now where we're releasing murderers and rapists from our overcrowded prisons to make room for pot-smoking Grateful Dead fans. It's insane! It's insane! The rest of the country is looking at marijuana saying, yes, this is safer than alcohol. My brother tells a joke about a pothead walking down the street this way and a drunk walking down the street the other way. They bang shoulders. The drunk says, hey! And the pothead says, hey, what? Which is the dangerous drug? The governor has the power over parole. We're going to eliminate parole for the violent criminals, and I'm going to pardon every non-violent drug offender. Also, anybody who committed a non-crime. Oh, your carry permit expired, you're going off to jail? That man's got a get out of jail free card once I'm governor. Unless you're convicted by a real judge for a real crime, property crime, crime against some person, or fraud, or something like that. If you've done something like that, you're going to serve every day of your sentence. Other than that, you've got to get out of jail free card from this governor. So that's how I would approach crime. So we look at taxes, we look at crime, and of course our prisons are going to shrink. We're not going to have as many people in jail. Last number I saw was 59.9% of the prisoners were there for drug offenses. More than half. And of course, we all know that America now has the highest per capita incarceration rate in the world. Where's that at?
More than China.
More than China. Absolutely correct. You should run for office, Tom. I mean, you talk a good game, you know your stuff. And you stole a couple of my lines, too.
Sorry.
That's fine. This is good news. I was up here, Rick, when was I up here with you? It's like 98?
Wow.
It was a long time ago. I ran for governor in 1998 against Tom Ridge, as well as 2002. So I think it was in 1998.
You're right.
And back then, things were pretty status quo here. But when I look at this group and listening, just listen to your stories there just now, this is great. You have a core here which can really push things a long way. But I digress. Taxes and spending, we're going to reduce it. Crime, we're going to reduce it. And the third one, most important thing, and I hear it all over the state, is education. Right now, our schools, our government schools, they're not doing a good job. Not at all. I have two ideas on how to improve education. The first one is to bring in somebody who's been left out of the equation. Right now, when you look at education, who decides the curriculum? An unelected board in Harrisburg. And now they're talking about this Common Core stuff. Have you heard about that?
Yeah.
It's not even going to be Pennsylvania. It's already telling you how to raise your children. Ridiculous. What we need to do is bring back into the equation the one person that's been forgotten in all this. The parents. So there's one simple fix that we can do. It'll be a fast fix, and we can do it today. What I would like to see is that parents would have the ability to choose any government school for their children, and the funding which would have gone to the local school will follow the child to the school of the parent's choice. What that will do is that will introduce competition into our schools without spending a single dollar. Good schools will get more students, more funding, they'll grow. The not so good schools, they'll have fewer students and they'll shrink. Taylor, are you applauding me? That's what it looked like.
And the failing schools will be forced to change into better schools.
Right.
What I would say is that people say, oh, everybody can't go to the good schools. Well, of course not. The best schools are now going to have so much funding and so many students, they'll be able to take over that failing school, do the same techniques that they're using in the good school, and bring them to the inner cities in Philadelphia. I live just outside of Philadelphia, and I see firsthand what happens there. We've got to close down those schools, and this gives us the power to do it. And it's not some bureaucrat saying, oh, we'll keep Gratz open and we'll close down Central or whatever it's going to be. It's the parents who decide what the best school is, not some bureaucrat. And we can do it immediately without spending a dime. And we'll have better education for our kids. That's the easy solution. There's a better solution, and that is to privatize our school system. Right now, is anyone in the school board here? No? Okay. I just make sure I'm not going to accidentally insult anybody, because there's a lot of pride involved with our government schools. And I don't mean pride saying we're doing a good job, because they do a pretty good job. I'm talking about the kind of pride the Bible talks about, the one that goeth before the fall. Because the cost of education is silly through the roof. Back in 2002, I did this same poll. I just did it again last week. Back then, I used the telephone and I called the schools. I said, what do you charge for tuition? Just in my neighborhood. I called the Montessori school, the Friends school, the Catholic school, this school, that school, the other school. I called about a dozen, 15 schools like that. What do you charge? Last week, I Googled all the schools in the area. And I'm getting numbers like $5,000 a year, $7,000, $9,000. If you go to the fancy schools, like Friends School, or Germantown Academy, or one of those others, they'll charge about $20,000, $25,000. Leaving out those exclusive schools, the average is about $9,000 a year. Then I took the Abington School District, same neighborhood, same set of kids, took their budget, divided it by the number of students they have, and it came out to over $18,000 a year that the government is spending to educate our children. $18,000 for the government schools, $9,000 for the private schools. If we privatize the schools, we can cut property taxes in half overnight. What the school district can do is place the students with the private schools. Shut down their Taj Mahals. No more arguing about whether or not you can pray in school. If you want your child to pray, send them to a school where they pray. If you don't, send them to a school where they don't. Bring the parents back into it. That's what I mentioned about the pride. There's a pride saying, oh no, we've got to run government schools. At twice the cost. If you go into the store and there's beautiful tomatoes side by side, one is $1 a pound, the other one's $2 a pound. Identical tomatoes. Or actually, the cheaper one's better. Which one are you going to buy? So there are my two plans for education. Bring parents into it to allow them to choose any school for their child, any government school. And the other one is just privatize the schools outright. Privatization is going to be a tough sell. That's why we have the easy one. Bring parents in. So there are three issues, the three big issues. There are numerous other issues, and I could talk about them all the time. Tom's already mentioned Article 1, Section 21 of the Pennsylvania Constitution, which says the right to bear arms shall not be questioned. I have no question what that means. But I do know one thing, that if people are going to keep on voting the way they've been voting, they're going to keep on getting just what they've been getting. I don't know about you, but I've had enough. You know, people tell me, Ken, I love your ideas. You're right, we've got to cut taxes and spending. You're right, parents should decide educational issues. You're absolutely right, we should get those crime, but you know, dude, you're never going to get elected. Wait, you can get elected, because it was mentioned earlier today. Turnout in the elections is very low. In gubernatorial races, it's an off year. There's no presidential race. There's no other statewide race next year except governor. We're expecting a turnout, historically speaking, 35%, maybe 40%, if it turns out to be a big race. Now, considering there are 12 million Pennsylvanians, 9 million voting-age Pennsylvanians, 8 million who are actually registered to vote, in a competitive three-way race, given that there's going to be a 35–40% turnout, all I need to do is attract the vote of 1 out of 8 voting-age Pennsylvanians. 1 out of 8 is all it takes to win a libertarian victory. So if you go into a room this size, what do we got here, about 15, 20 people? If all of you are laughing at me, and 2 of you are sitting there saying, this guy makes sense, this guy makes sense. That's all it takes. That's why we can win this year. We need to mobilize that 1 out of 8. So victory is nearby. So that's my plan, that's my approach, that's how we're going to come at it. And as I said, I don't know about you, I have had enough of the alternative. Now at this point, if I'm addressing a random audience, I would shift over to Q&A. But let me push on a little bit further. Make sure I'm timing myself too. I'm a Toastmaster. Any Toastmasters in the audience? I'll talk about Toastmasters in a minute.
You got plenty of time, it's only 3:30.
It's 3:30 in the morning. I'm keeping Taylor up past her bedtime.
Yeah, you were sleeping for about 6 hours. Yeah.
Does this sound like good stuff?
Yeah.
You want to see this come to pass?
Yes.
It's not going to be easy. I've got these broken down into 3 phases. First phase is where we stand right now. This is the exploratory phase, where we're putting things together, putting together a campaign. So this is part of the reason why I'm here tonight, is because I'm looking for people who can help. Help in numerous ways. The biggest way is to go to the Pennsylvania Libertarian State Party Convention, which is going to be held end of February, early March.
February 22nd.
Okay? You know more than I do. Well, at least I heard it was right around.
We just voted at the last board meeting.
Okay.
Where's it going to be?
It's going to be in the Allentown area?
That's the first option. I think if that didn't work, it was going to be Reading as the backup.
That's
Okay.
even closer.
Not going to be too far away. It should be an easy trip. So you should show up there and make sure you vote for the person that you're looking to do it. Right now, I've heard of 3 people who are looking for the nomination. Of course, I'm one of them. Second one, it's in your minutes. You met her last month, Betsy Summers. Before I announced, I called Betsy. I said, Betsy, I hear you're running. She says, yeah, it looks like nobody else is going to, so I figured I should do it. I So, I'm thinking of doing it. Just, hallelujah, I don't have to do it.
That sounds like Bets.
So I asked her, I said, Betsy, would you like to go for lieutenant governor? Because it's always good to have a woman on the ballot. Because, I'm not a sexist person. I just look at the actual vote totals.
Yeah.
And if a woman, all things equal, a woman will get more votes than a man. So if Betsy and I can get together and do this, it should be a good thing. The third person who's running, his name is Steve Miller. He's a comedian in Philadelphia.
Wow.
I don't think he has
That's a
much of it.
character.
Do you know Steve?
Through Facebook, different things I've seen,
Uh-huh.
different videos he's posted. Yeah, he's quite a character.
He's a character. He ran for county police court, one of the courts in Philadelphia this year. He was put in on a special election. Didn't do much with it. So he's pretty new to the political scene. I'm hoping that the convention will choose me for several reasons. First of all, I've been around the block twice. As I said, I ran against Tom Ridge in 1998. I was the new kid on the block. I wasn't sure what I was doing. I got the hang of it about 3 days after the election was over. So I said, I got to do this again. And I went out last time, and it just rocked. Absolutely rocked. I had more press. I was walking down the street, people say, hey, you're the Libertarian guy! What's going to be happening to you now? A lot. I guarantee you're going to become a local celebrity. I also knew how to put together a campaign. In fact, Bob, that video you watched on how to run for local office, there's a corresponding video how to run for statewide office. How many people remember Russ Diamond and PA Clean Sweep? Guess who trained Russ? I took my playbook from 2002, and I said, Russ, here's what you need to do. Russ was thinking of running for governor. Matter of fact, he tried to run for governor in 2006. He was still a Libertarian with the Libertarian Party at that time. I took detailed notes, gave them all to Russ, and that's the basis for that video that I put together. So I've been around the block. That's why I'm asking for your support at the convention. Because of the candidates who are running, I'd love to get Betsy alongside of me. I'd also think I'd do a better job than Steve Miller. And it's up for you to decide that. Tom, you got a question?
It's Dan, and the question is,
Dan.
in terms of mechanics, you get picked as a nominee, and it's the third largest party, and it's a pretty big party in Pennsylvania compared to the rest of the country. But I know how skewed the election laws are. How many signatures are you going to need? And you're going to need them in a lot of places, aren't you? All those counties?
Dan, you're doing it again. You're taking the next step.
That's
Step one.
it's like Ed McMahon to John.
Here's Kenny. Step one is to get the nomination. Once we have the nomination, that's where the real battle begins. Because the Pennsylvania Constitution, Article 1, Section 5, says all elections shall be free and equal. Sometimes. Some people are more equal than others. Because for Corbett to get on the ballot, he needs 2,000 signatures. For Allison Schwartz, who is my congresswoman, don't hold it against me, for her to get on the ballot, she needs 2,000 signatures. When I ran in 2002, do you know how many I needed? 21,000, more than 10 times as many. Even though the Constitution says elections shall be equal. It's a funny formula that they use every year to determine the number of signatures.
So like 1% of the highest?
Changed, 2%. 2% of the highest vote getter in the prior election in that district. So what they're doing is next year they're going to look back to this year's judicial race. And fortunately, it was a close race. So the winner didn't get that many. Who was it, Stabile? I don't like that man. I'm going to talk about him in a minute too. Stabile just barely beat the other guy. 2% of Stabile's total is about 16,000, 17,000 signatures. Only 8 times as many.
Do they have to be apportioned by county, or how does it?
There is a minor, yes. You have to get 100 signatures from each of 10 different counties. But when you're getting 18,000 signatures and 17,000, and that's not all, because you need to get a cushion.
Yeah.
And we get
challenged with, yeah.
because we do get challenged. In fact, I ran in 2002. I didn't get challenged. I was on national television. I was in all the debates. I had a wonderful time. Matter of fact, C-SPAN still has in their archives. If you go to my website, right on the homepage, you can click through if you want to watch my performance from 2002 in the debates. Well, after that, I'm saying, geez, they looked at that and says, we gotta get this Libertarian out of here. In 2004, the next statewide race, the Democrats had this new playbook, and they challenged Ralph Nader. They said, let's see if this works. They challenged him, challenged all of his signatures. He collected 50-some thousand signatures. He only needed 25,000 or something. But they started throwing signatures out for silly reasons. If you signed where you should have printed and printed where you should have signed, if you used ditto marks, if you weren't registered at the right address, all sorts of silly little things. They struck off signature after signature after signature, and they got him below the minimum. They threw him off the ballot. But they weren't content just to throw the guy off the ballot. They fined him $80,000.
Wow.
Court costs, signature handwriting costs, Department of State costs, loser pays costs, opposing counsel costs. Came up to $80,000. He appealed it, went all the way to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. They said, nah. Took it to the Supreme Court. They said, nah, you lose, pay up. He's still arguing the case. That was 2004. 2006. 2006 was a special year because there were no races, judicial races in 2005. So they went back to 2004 to calculate that 2% number. It was calculated on Bob Casey's victory, which was the largest victory in Pennsylvania history. Our number that year was 67,000 signatures.
That's 1,000 county.
Russ Diamond tried to get, he got 45,000, couldn't get any further, he gave up. Well, there was one guy who did it, the green guy, Carl Romanelli, running for U.S. Senate. He collected 98,500 signatures. The most ever in Pennsylvania. Blew away Peg Luxon, Constitution Party. She had 78,000 in 1994. That was the record beforehand. He had 98,000. Same people said, we now have all these precedents about signing where you should print where you sign. They dragged him into court, threw him off the ballot, and fined him $80,000. 2008, they did the same thing again. This time to the Libertarian Party presidential candidate, Bob Barr. But he's a former congressman. He was able to prevail. He stayed on the ballot. 2010, they got their playbook down. They have special software that does this now. They challenged, Democrats and Republicans challenged every single third-party statewide candidate and independent. Everyone, bar none. They sent these cute letters. I should have brought the letter with me. It's a beautiful paragraph from their lawyer to our party saying, if your candidates withdraw now, we won't seek costs, which should be, according to precedent, $106,000. If you withdraw now, we won't pursue that. It's economic extortion. That was 2010. Of course, everybody withdrew. There were no third-party candidates on the ballot. 2012 comes along, same thing again, except we were ready. We fought back, and by the slimmest of margins, we got on the ballot. So we were able to have our presidential candidate on the ballot 2 years ago. We're expecting the same thing again this year. So what we're doing is we're ready. Just like they learned, we've learned. So starting on March 12th, that's when our petition period begins, we're going to need help. Help getting signatures. The big push is going to be on primary day. Stand outside your polling place, and as people come out, excuse me, so help get a friend on the ballot. Doesn't commit you to anything, just support democracy in your neighborhood. Personally, I have about a 40-50% success rate. Somebody comes out, they'll sign. We're planning to do this statewide, across the entire, every polling place we can. In fact, we're going to see if we can hire people if we can't get enough volunteers. And we want to get that petition drive done in one day. So Dan, that addresses your question.
It sure does.
That's the second part. If we don't succeed, one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to drag us into court, and I'm going to lose my house, I hope not, or we're going to succeed. I expect to succeed. Once we succeed, that's when the floodgates open. And I can tell you, it happened before. The minute you're on the ballot, everybody starts sending you questionnaires. You get invited to organizations, outside organizations, League of Women Voters, the debates. I was in 4 televised debates the last time. 2 of them broadcast nationally. 2 of them broadcast across the state. That is the sort of stuff that is waiting. That is the prize. First we got to get organized, then we got to get on the ballot, then the fun begins. And before then, there's not much more. So I have up here a sign-up sheet. If you're willing to help, please, name, email address, phone number, and whatever your expertise is. Like, if you're a research expert like Joe is, that'd be good. If you're somebody who's good at talking, like Dan is. If you're somebody who's a council member, who's prominent in your community, and can talk to other people. If you're a business owner, ready to work our butt off, is that what you're saying? Whatever it may be. I'm looking for all sorts of specialties. I still need a treasurer, somebody to keep track of the funds. I'm just starting. You're the first bunch of people I'm talking to, so it's still pretty close. I haven't contacted my prior treasurer. I did contact my last campaign manager. He's not working now either. It's pretty tough. So I'm looking for campaign manager, the treasurer. Treasurer position is not so tough because the only hard part is filling out the campaign finance forms, and that's just transferring numbers from spreadsheet into theirs. I'm also looking for a county coordinator, somebody who can organize things in the county. Usually it's the county chair, but it can really be anybody.
There you go, Janine.
I like the county, yeah.
It doesn't have to be the county, or his or her designee. And that would probably be a good role for you. Or even if you're thinking of doing something crazy, you can go for a campaign manager. Campaign manager really sits over everything else and makes sure everything else is happening.
Get to work. Yeah.
One other thing that would make the petition drive easier is if there were more candidates. Because as a third party or an independent, you have the ability to stack candidates. That means you can put more than one on one petition. So next year, the only races that are up are governor, lieutenant governor, some state senate, and all of the state house, all 203 state house seats. So if you're looking to help, one of the best things you could do is to run as a state representative candidate. Typically you need 300 signatures. That's the minimum. And of course you want to get a cushion so you don't get challenged. 400, 500. So if you were a state rep candidate, you could just organize people on election day. I did this in 1994. My first race was for state rep. I have 38 polling places in my state rep district. And I had each one of them manned for a couple hours a day, some of them for all day. In that one day, the people collecting signatures for me collected over 1,000 signatures. So if you want to do something good for the party, think about running for state representative. It's not difficult. And you could just be a paper candidate. I know some libertarians can say, "Yeah, don't tell them that." Which means just get your name on the ballot. You'll get invited to the debates. You'll get sent paperwork. The reporter's going to call you up and ask you your opinion. And they'll print it. There's no better way to get the libertarian word out than running for public office. It also fires people up. Because, dude, when you got a winner in your midst, I mean, that just empowers everybody else. And when you have other people running saying, "Yeah, I can do this too," and there's an energy that builds one on top of the other. It brings in people from the outside, brand new people you haven't seen before. Think about running for state rep. Not too many signatures, not too difficult. One day commitment to get yourself on the ballot. That primary day, just get your friends, family. I have my mom and dad out there. My youngest daughter was about Taylor's age when I ran for state representative, and she was out there with a little sign saying, "Vote for my dad." Vote for my-" It was great. Little lady's coming out. "You got a good salesman there." It's an easy thing to do. But your 1,000 signatures count for everybody else. So there's a state senate candidate above you who's going to need 500, maybe 1,000 signatures. It'll count for your state senate candidate. And of course, whoever the governor candidate is, whether it's me, Stephen Miller, or whoever, it'll count for them as well. So if we can get 17 state rep candidates, each one getting themselves on the ballot with that primary day trip, we've got the minimum. So it doesn't take a lot. There are what, 67 counties in the Commonwealth? If each county does one state rep candidate, that's 67,000 signatures. And that is my most important goal for being here tonight, is to ask you, somebody, you don't have to volunteer to help me. I'm not the important one here. The important one is to make sure that the libertarian message gets out there. And the best way to do that is like anything else, from the bottom up. We're a party of individuals. We defend the ultimate minority, the lone individual. Here's your chance to take that step, to get the Libertarian Party's message out there, to get it into the press, to get it onto the websites, to get it on television, to get it all over the place. So think about it. Now, I know, Bob, you were thinking of doing it. This would be a good chance for you because it's relatively easy to do, and it'd give you a chance to get your feet wet. And Bernie, you're talking about Veterans Affairs? That's definitely a national issue. Now, I'm a state guy, and I really can't do much about the veterans issues. You could run for Congress. And every signature that you get would also count for Bob. Would also count for whoever the Libertarian Party's candidate for governor is. You got a good fire in the belly. You can use Dan here as your campaign manager. I tell you, between the two of you. You know, Joe doing the research for you, bringing out all the statistics about the terrible way that veterans are being treated. We're an organization here, and we can do this. Now, a lot of times I talk to people about this. They run for office like, oh no, I couldn't do that. I couldn't see me standing up in front of them. Not even a room this big. Let me ask, who's nervous just now introducing themselves? Be honest. Me. When I first joined the Libertarian Party, I was terrified to stand up in public. In 1995, I was the vice chair of the state party. And I had to, at the banquet, I had to give the award to the outgoing chairman. I couldn't eat. I thought I was going to get sick. That's how nervous I was. Obviously, I got over it. And the way I got over it was I joined an organization called Toastmasters. I mentioned it earlier. Toastmasters is an international organization, over 250,000 members. Their mission is to provide a supportive atmosphere to learn public speaking and leadership skills. It's where I learned to speak in public. It's where I learned not to have my knees knocked. It's where I learned to be able to eat dinner and enjoy it before giving somebody an award. I learned how to use gestures. I learned how to use props. I learned when to use pauses. You learn all the tricks of the trade, how to do it. It's easy to do. It just takes a little bit of time. Typically, 6 months, you won't recognize yourself with your ability to speak in public. I should have looked to see where the nearest clubs are. If you go out to Toastmasters.org, put in your zip code, it'll tell you where all the nearest clubs are. In the Philadelphia area where I'm at, there are 50, 60 clubs. I know that there are some, well, I won't even venture where. I know that there are some close by. The Toastmasters does two things, as I mentioned, public speaking and leadership skills. Leadership skills, you learn how to run a meeting. Sean, you're doing a good job. You can do a better job. You can put polish on that diamond. You got a great speaking voice, you can learn how to use it. When to raise it, when to lower it. You can learn how to organize and motivate volunteers. All this I learned in Toastmasters. I could not have run for governor in 2002 if I hadn't joined Toastmasters. So if you take away two things from what I'm saying tonight. Number one, consider running for public office, because it's the best thing you can do for the Libertarian Party. It'll energize other Libertarians, and it'll get your message out. The second thing to do is join Toastmasters, because Toastmasters will teach you how to communicate in public. We Libertarians, we have the best message on the planet. Liberty, freedom. But the message is useless if we can't communicate it. It's useless if you can't organize people to present that message. So Toastmasters and running for state rep. So that's the summary of everything I wanted to say. You heard my stump speech. You heard my political side, saying with the three-step approach, getting the nomination, getting on the ballot, let the fun begin. So I would now be happy to take any questions on any subject. There you go, 15 minutes.
I have a question.
Yes.
I was listening to you talk earlier before about parties. Would that be, would that also include any retroactive possession charges?
Yes, and you can also expunge records. So if you had got caught smoking a joint back when you were in high school, we can get a complete pardon on that.
Okay, and you would support the push for completely legalization and regulation of marijuana?
What I would like to see is that we would treat all dangerous drugs the same way that we treat alcohol. Keep them out of the hands of kids. As a matter of fact, we could even initially start off by putting them in the state sewer system. So there's state, why do they call them now? The wine and spirits stores.
Okay,
But the idea is to keep them out of the hands of the kids.
understood.
I have a question.
Sure.
Adding on to what he was saying, what about if retroactive from another state?
I think all I could do is what's inside of Pennsylvania. It'd be like me saying, oh, you did something in France, I'll pardon you under French law. It doesn't work that way. Only governor of Pennsylvania. Unless, well, wherever it's from, you should work to get governor elected there too. Yeah, Bert?
What if you were found guilty of a crime, you did your sentence, and then after you did your sentence, they found out that you weren't guilty of that crime, and it's still on your record?
Well, that in itself is a crime. But if it's still on your record, you could still be retroactively pardoned. That fits in with Charlie's question.
Because I was charged with assaulting a police officer, and I never assaulted her, and they found this out after I did 90 days of house arrest, and it's still on my record that I was charged with assault, and I don't know why it's on there if I wasn't guilty of it.
Shouldn't be, that's correct.
That has all kinds of other ramifications to gun ownership, voting rights, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And federal law says, if I'm remembering, let me just make sure I get it right, if you were ever found guilty of any crime that could be punishable by a year or more, even a misdemeanor, then they can come in and swoop down, take your guns.
Take your guns away, right? Same thing. It has to be a real crime. Has to be a conviction in front of a real judge. Because there's a lot of convictions that don't happen in front of judges.
Well, see, that thing being on my record is got me at a standstill. I'm not working right now, and I put in application after application after, and every single one of them says, were you ever convicted of a crime? Do you have a crime on your record?
Yeah.
Of course, this crime won't hold it, we won't hold it against you. Well, then why are you asking me? You know, and I have to put yes, because when they look, it's there. And then to explain to them that I'm not guilty, well, the answer is, oh, well, everybody's always not guilty. There's 100 prisoners that aren't guilty. Well, I mean, I was actually told by the magistrate when he took my bracelet off that, you know, we made a mistake, we realized you weren't guilty and it won't be on your record, and it still is on my record, you know, and that holds me back from getting a job, you know?
You have to get it expunged.
If the economy was running right, that wouldn't hold you back, because they're, just from an unemployment standpoint, Corbett's done a few good things. He's made severance deductible, he's made people look for work and register for work. But right now, and I'm not going to tell any of you how to do it, you want to scam unemployment for yourself? It's easy. You want to scam unemployment for the tune of millions of dollars, and I'm sure they're doing it. Organized crime. There's no face-to-face contact. You're in these call centers. The laws are really complex, and it's not just unemployment. Welfare, I have friends who work in the welfare department. They have 1,700 caseloads on their desk. They aren't allowed to take the time to check anything. Go down and apply. Go to Reading, get your 3 Obama phones and your food stamps, and you can put down, you can give them your tax stuff and show them, look, I'm making $100,000 a year. Here's your Obama phone and your food stamps.
It's difficult to get on unemployment because as a business owner, I'm in the same position that Rick is. Because I was paying into it, and I could never get out of it. And it's the same thing, I have my wife working for me. If I have to lay her off, she can't even collect either. It's just not fair.
The thing is, the laws are so convoluted that the system is broken. And the Cloward and Piven, which you've all probably heard of from Glenn Beck or whatever, rule of breaking the system by overburdening it it's happening now. So as governor, what are you going to do about all the regulations that are choking you? So you talk about these regulations. After he was done with the feds, he had to deal with the LCB, and they were measuring his room with...
I have an answer. I have an answer to that. And I saved it for last because it's probably the most convoluted answer. I knew the question was going to come up, or one of the similar questions. I mentioned before, this is my novel. I call it my platform novel because this is fiction. This is a parody sequel to Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. Who's read Atlas Shrugged? Yeah, this group, I guess there's several. It's not necessary to have read her book. What I do is I present a brand new political concept in this book. I call it the separation of society and state. Right now, the state has taken on so many societal functions. Things that used to be done by churches, that should be done by society, not by the government. In fact, there are so many things that are being paid for by that. The welfare state. Let's use the federal case as the example. There are so many giveaways at the federal level that right now, roughly 60–70% of the federal budget are giveaway programs. Whether it's Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, food stamps, all those different things. I looked at the budget. The budget's about $3.5 trillion, federal budget. Federal revenues are $2.3 trillion, and that extra $1.2 trillion were borrowed. The cost of the welfare state is $2.2 trillion. All federal revenue, virtually all federal revenue, is being eaten up by the welfare state. What we need to do is separate society and state. Take all those societal functions the government is doing and separate them from the state. To use the Pennsylvania example, our $56 billion budget, 80% of it, 80% are giveaways. And that number grows every year. It's bankrupting us on the national level. It's bankrupting us on the state level. What we need to do is separate society and state. And my plan for doing it, which I present in my novel there, is that we create a separate organization. I call it society, in a fit of originality. Society would look just like regular government. There would be a president, there would be a Senate, there would be a House of Representatives, and they would pass what I call guidelines, not laws, because they would be voluntary. So these standards, if you're starting a business, they would be voluntary standards. The main difference between society and the state is that society does not have any coercive powers. No coercive power of taxation. So I can't garnish 15.3% of your wages to pay for a retirement program you may not want to be part of, or won't be there for you when you get to be that age. So society would take on the role of caring for the unemployed, caring for the sick, caring for the elderly, setting standards for businesses. And then, if you're a businessman, you could say, I meet all society standards. You can reliably come and patronize my business. Or, let's say you're a doctor, and you're using some new cure, not approved by the FDA. You can say, I meet all society standards except I'm using this new cure. Nobody's going to come in and shut you down because the standards are all voluntary. You just advertise that you meet them, or you don't advertise that you meet them. And then it's up to us, the public, to say, do I want to go to a bank that practices fractional reserve? Do I want to use a currency that's nothing but paper? Or would I rather have something that's solid coins that ring when you play with them? You be the one to make the decision. There would not be anybody holding a gun to your head saying, you've got to use these, I call it circus money, those clad coins, or these things. How much does that work? Nothing. What would you rather have? One of these? Or one of these? Right now you're being forced to use this. Anybody here of the Liberty Dollar? Bernard von Rothaus? He came up with an alternative currency. Well, he's in prison now. They confiscated everything he owned. I'm waiting for the same to happen to Bitcoin. Familiar with Bitcoin, the digital currency? Same thing's going to happen. I'm predicting. Say you heard it here first. But to take a step back, if we separated society and state, society could set these standards. Say your coins have to be 90% silver, 10% zinc, as they used to be. And you can stamp on there, meets, seal approval of society. So that's what to do, separate society and state. We can take that 80% of Pennsylvania's budget, which is currently a giveaway program, back it out of the state, little by little. That's how I'm going to reduce the personal income tax over 4 years, by offloading things to this new entity called society. And we'll take care of people as best we can. The way society will get money They'll hold telethons, bake sales. They'll ask you to contribute the same way that churches survive, the same way the YMCA survives, the same way the Libertarian Party survives. Voluntary contributions from people who care. Not involuntary contributions from people with a gun held to their head by the IRS. Anyway, the story's there in narrative form. Yeah, Brent.
You said earlier about the guy being in jail now for the currency. I was watching a thing a few years ago on TV, a veteran who was in water purification when he was in the military.
I'm sorry, you said what?
Water purification.
Okay, thank you.
I say water because.
I'm half deaf on my right side, and I'm from Philadelphia, I say water.
But he got out of the military and he worked and worked on making a vehicle run on water. And he made a dune buggy run on water. He drove it 60 miles an hour, 3 laps around his block. 2 weeks later, he was gone. Nobody ever knew what happened to him. He disappeared. The only other person that knew the plans was his daughter. A week later, she was gone, along with all the plans and everything, to run that vehicle on water. They didn't want him to do that. You just reminded me of that when you said about him with the currency. I mean, they made him disappear. He was gone. You know, we can't have a vehicle that runs on water because you won't get your money for your taxes on your gas and your fuel. And
Mr. Von Nothouse is in prison. You can go visit him, so he hasn't quite disappeared yet. But there are other alternatives coming along, and everybody has learned from his mistakes, and they're trying to dance around it. So that's my plan, is to separate society and state. That way we can have a safety net for people who truly need it, and you're not going to be able to keep taxing and taxing and taxing and taxing people. Because there's a debt bomb that's going to explode sometime soon. I don't mean like today or tomorrow. I would say within our lifetimes.
I think back to the way my grandfather lived, you know, and he would tell stories about people who would come to the door, and they lived through the Depression, they lived through some tough times. But everybody knew their neighbor, and you knew the guy that was trying to work, and if we could take the money that we send to the federal government, take a quarter of it, and directly help our neighbors who needed that help, how much more effective, and the person that doesn't need it, that we know doesn't want to work, he's not going to get his Obama phone anymore.
But do you know, this is another one of my lines that Dan stole, but he didn't have my prop. Because when you're asking for help from the government, and they said, oh, we need a tax dollar from you, you know what happens to that dollar when you send it to Washington, the first thing? A bunch of it vanishes in that bureaucracy. And then they say, all right, we'll send this to the state. But the state has their own bureaucracy too. And it's gone. You're lucky if you get a dime on the dollar back, coming back to your state from that dollar you sent to Washington. And the dollar, it doesn't go to you, it goes to my political buddy. They play politics with your money. If we kept that dollar locally, we could help 10 times as many people.
can I have your prop?
Yes. I did this in 2002 on national television, and it became big news. And I tell people, I will swap. I sign my prop. I always sign them and date them. They're all out there. And I'll swap it for any Federal Reserve member. If you want to give me another $1 for it, that's fine. If you want to give me a 5.
Oh, make it 20, why not, make some more money out of it.
Hey, I'm a libertarian. Your life, your way, you choose.
Oh, there you go, then you got one to the
He's a
broadcast.
Because they were bullying.
Yeah.
My daughter will sell your
He was
bracelet.
losing the other. Why does that community come together and help them?
Yeah, they can take, the government is powerful enough to give you.
Now,
everything you
Dan, you
want.
see, I made the same point you did, but a lot more memorably.
Yeah.
I learned this in
But
Toastmasters.
when that first came out, I thought, but if these people would just help this man.
I like to set fires.
They would have never. He was living in a car. They took his house.
Do you know, let me tell you something funny about this. I did this in the second televised debate. It was nationally broadcast, and Mike Fisher was running against Ed Rendell. He was the state attorney general. He went ballistic. He called a press conference to have me barred from future debates. I'm the third-party candidate, right? Ed Rendell is galloping to the governor's mansion, and Mike Fisher took his eye off the ball, and he looked at me. He said, "You you gotta get out of these debates. You're tearing up dollar bills. And he called the Secret Service. Can Ken tear up dollar bills? Can he do this? This was the same time that they had that DC sniper. So here's the Secret Service trying to catch the DC sniper. He's like, Ken's tearing up dollar bills. So I held my own press conference where I took a couple of them and I taped them back together. There's a Libertarian in York, Carl Spangler. He runs the Central Family Restaurant. I held a press conference there, and I bought my lunch with torn up money. And of course, the press is there. That's why you should run for office, is because when you call a press conference, reporters show up. It's surprising. There are cameramen, and they're interviewing Carl, and they're saying, Carl, you took that money from Ken? Well, yeah, it's money. Yeah, but it's torn up. I get torn money all the time. What's a big deal? We estimated Mike Fisher gave me $300,000 worth of free advertising for doing that. And he took his eye off the ball, and Ed Rendell just...
It's only $1. You should do it with $100 bill.
You know, it was the second debate when I tore it up, and Mike went ballistic. At the third debate, I started talking about federal dollars. The question was, should we get more federal money? And I said, because of Mike Fisher's sensibilities, I'm not going to tear up $1 bill. I reached into my pocket. I'm going to tear up a 5.
Cool.
He hated me. That's the best part, because once you get on the ballot, you get on the stage. If you go to YouTube, I have a video. I ran for state rep last year. There was an accident when I got on the ballot. Long story, don't ask. Especially since the camera's running. But I had one there, the same kind of discussion, where you can annoy. You go to debates, and you just hit them with the truth. I pull out my Constitution, which I don't have with me. I wrote down a note, next time bring a Constitution. Not that one. I'm running for Pennsylvania governor.
There's a whole
Pennsylvania,
bunch
Pennsylvania.
there. There's a whole bunch there.
Look at that. Wonderful. I'm at the debate, and my opponent, have you read this? Well, I'm passingly familiar with it. You're sure about all this? The question was, jobs program. You gonna give us a jobs program? Democrat says, yeah, we need a jobs program. Republican says, yeah, we need a jobs program. I'm like, do you swear an oath on all this? Show me, where does it say that you can have jobs programs? It doesn't. You're an oath breaker. And they just sit there and they fume because you're right. And that's the best part of running for office, is you can put them on the hot seat. That's why you should run for state rep. This is good. This is Charlie's fault. This used to be a classroom. You know they don't teach this in Pennsylvania classrooms? I'm a professional public speaker. People actually pay me to talk. I know people pay me to shut up. But one of the things I talk about is the Pennsylvania Constitution, Article 1, because they don't teach it in schools.
Yeah, you don't.
In 2002, when I ran for governor, more than half of my appearances were at schools, colleges, high schools. I made it as low as 3rd grade. And I asked the same question. Who's ever read the Pennsylvania Constitution? Oh, is this mic broken? Hello? Who has read? Nobody. I asked the teacher. Well, it's covered in 4th grade, and we say that there's a Constitution. Does it say, Article 1, Section 2, that people have at all times the right to alter, reform, or abolish their government as they see fit? You're not teaching the kids that they can abolish their own government? No. Article 1, Section 21, we already mentioned, the right to bear arms shall not be questioned. What about Section 25, which says that all of Article 1 shall forever remain inviolate and removed from the power of government? What about Article 1, Section 6, jury nullification? Who's familiar with jury nullification? Yeah, I'm in the right room. If you're a juror, you could say not guilty even if the guy's guilty as all hell. If you think the law doesn't apply, you should always try and get on a jury. Because if it's, for example, a marijuana case, and you're against the war on drugs, you can say not guilty. They used this during the Civil War. People were accused of helping runaway slaves, breaking the law. Jury would say, I'm not going to convict him. He's doing the right thing. I don't care what the law says. The law says, yeah, the law says you can lock him up for harboring a runaway slave. Don't care. Not guilty. Set him free. They used it during Prohibition, when people were getting arrested for making their own homebrew in the bathtub. Oh, we caught him with a homebrew in the bathtub. Jury, what do you say? Not guilty. I'm coming over later on. I want some of your beer. You have that power today. I don't have direct evidence of this. I hear they're doing it in Kentucky. The number one cash crop in Kentucky is marijuana. And when they get caught and they get into court, not guilty. Doesn't matter what the law says. You have that power. You are the fourth branch of government. Article 1, Section 6. It's in there. It's something that can never be taken away from you. I'm going to toot our horn here. We Montgomery County Libertarians, you may have heard this. We just put up signs in the metro in D.C. on jury nullification. You have the right to nullify laws. Good jurors nullify bad laws. It's at the Judiciary Square station, right under the federal courthouse in D.C. Any juror, and the next one over, which I think is what, Union Station? We have 3 of these things up there. Cost us about $3 grand. We put up a lot of county money, and we got some donations from other people. They're up there right now, this very minute. Just Google jury nullification. And Jim Babb, who is...
I saw him on Fox News, I posted it.
Jim Babb was on Fox News. We're sitting around, this is just 2 months ago, we're sitting around with Montgomery County, our libertarian meeting just like this. Jim says, you want to mess up their minds? Anyway, Article 1, Section 6 is in there. There's all kinds of pieces of this, of Article 1. If you haven't read it, they're right here. Grab it. Take it home. Read it. And Taylor, you can embarrass your teacher. You'd say, this is the document that says how Pennsylvania's government is running. When will you teach me this? When are we going to read this? Can I do a report on Article 1? It's short. It's only a couple pages. And William Penn personally wrote most of it. Ben Franklin wrote some other parts of it. It's been handed down to us for hundreds of years. The public talk that I give on it, I call it William Penn's unsung legacy.
Wasn't William Penn involved in jury nullification also?
I'm sorry, say again?
William Penn, wasn't he,
He was
found innocent of...
He was the one who established jury nullification. He was in England, preaching in the streets, which is the same crime that Jesus was accused of. You're not allowed to preach in the streets like that. And it was against the law, the English law, that he couldn't do that. The jury refused to convict him. And the king says, well, if you're going to refuse to convict him, I'll put you guys up in the Tower of London. And he locked the jury in the Tower of London until they came back with a guilty verdict. Bread and water, we kept them up there for weeks. The people said, no, you can't do this. They started doing protests and demonstrations, and eventually the king had to capitulate. And what that did is that established the right of the jurors to try the law as well as the facts of the case. So, good point. Came to us through William Penn. There's a lot of things I could say. But see, now it's another 20 minutes after the last time I looked at the clock. I can go on and on. I learned this at Toastmasters. I can't say enough good things about Toastmasters. It changed my life. I gotta say one thing though, it is really, really expensive. $36 dues every 6 months. Break your back. It's the best bargain in the world. Dale Carnegie will charge you thousands of dollars. Give you an intensive couple-week thing, and then good luck, go away. But our Toastmasters Club, we meet twice a month. We have the Libertarian Toastmasters Club. Most of us are libertarians in there. I practice my stump speech there. I'll practice other political speeches there. It's always a good time. But I'm talking about too much. Start sounding Dan. Any other questions? No, you got a good gift there, sir. And you speak well. You don't have many ums, ahs, you knows. You communicate very well.
It still costs a quarter if you do this?
Sir?
God didn't make me shy.
They still charge you money, like a quarter or $1 if you say in this one?
They have, yes.
They do that, they used to do that.
The general evaluator does have the authority to fine people for little mistakes. Now, when I'm filling that role, the way I do it is the opposite. I'll say, Sean, you had no ums or ahs or you knows. Fine job. So he gets a fine.
That's right.
I'm a punch the poor guys. Toastmasters is fun. Check it out. And I'm well known in Toastmasters. And our district, which is the functional unit of Toastmasters, runs from Harrisburg to the ocean to Scranton down to the Mason-Dixon line. So if you mention my name anywhere in there, they go, oh, you know Ken. Huh? Other questions?
You're gonna eliminate about the license, the carrying.
Yes, yes, and you know,
Okay.
Huh? Handgun.
handguns. Yes, the carry permits,
Yeah.
that's also in here. Because I've come up with the opposite. Now, why on earth would you take an honest citizen and assume that they're a criminal? I'd like to see it the other way around, saying, we're assuming you're an honest man. And if you're a criminal, then we'll take steps against you. We're all going to punish the criminal, not the honest person.
Right.
So I would like to see not a carry permit, but rather a can't carry permit. So if you're convicted of a crime with a gun, you've now convinced us by your actions that you do not know how to handle a gun properly. So what we'll do is we'll give you a can't carry permit. Not permanent, maybe a year, 6 months, depending on what you did with your gun. If it accidentally went off in city limits, give you maybe a couple months of can't carry. If we catch you carrying when you have a can't carry permit, we'll throw you in jail for a couple of days, teach you a lesson. I would take that idea of can't carry permits and I would expand it. Why should you have to show your papers, please, every time an officer stops you in your car? You don't need a driver's license. What you should have is a can't drive license because you've shown by your actions that you can't drive a car properly. So if they caught you swerving, DUI, whatever,